Jock, LSU Bama week. I was looking forward to our conversation. I was kind of setting it up. Some of the memories that pop out. Somebody sent over a picture of Kevin Falk back in 98, who still holds the most rushing yards against Alabama for a LSU tailback, as Falk went over 200 that day in Tuscaloosa. But we were talking about the Rohan game, what you highlighted last week inside the WAFB studios. The 2000 game where Brady James is beckoning the official to look up at the newly implemented jumbotrons into Tiger Stadium. What are some of the memories kind of maybe outside of the Saban years before we kind of dive into that part of the history that stand out to you?
Well, Jordy, my first year of ever paying attention to LSU football was 1987. Okay. It was the first game I ever went to, and they played Florida earlier in the season, the week after the 13-13 tie against Ohio State, and then I was hooked. And that was the one game LSU lost that year, was to Alabama. They came into Tiger Stadium with Bobby Humphrey at running back. Tommy Hodson was injured, couldn't play. Mickey Guidry played instead. They put Hodson in at the end of the game trying to come back, and they lost 22-10. And that was the first time I watched LSU football lose, and I was devastated. And my parents let me know that there was probably going to be a lot more losses in the future, you know. But that was a great team that went 10-1-1 and finished fifth in the country. I remember that game very well. Certainly, I think the next year, LSU went to Tuscaloosa. David Browndyke made a late field goal.
That's right. Tony Moss made a big catch across the middle.
Yes, catch and run across the middle. I think LSU fell behind 15-0. They were awful, and it was like they're going to get buried. And they came back and won 19-18. That was the earthquake game year. LSU won the SEC, although they did not play in the SEC championship game. The 90s were rough. Curly Hallman and whatnot. Although his biggest win at LSU, the Pigs Fly game. I think Kevin Mawai told the story. He gathered up the team the day before, and he said something like, "I think we're going to win tomorrow. We're going to win tomorrow." And they upset. Alabama had won a number of games in a row, 28 in a row, or a 30-game. They hadn't lost in 30 games. They had one tie along the way, and LSU beat them. I think it might have been the first time ESPN College Game Day came to Baton Rouge, 1996, and that was the Charles Alexander nightmare, in which LSU scored on their first drive. Penalty takes it off the board, and then I think Sean Alexander. Yeah, Charles played for LSU, Heisman Trophy candidate in the late 70s. Sean Alexander ran for almost 300 yards against LSU that night, and they won 26-0. I think the next year was when Falk stiff-armed that guy in Tuscaloosa, gave him a ride for the long touchdown, and LSU won 27-0. But obviously those were the ones off the top of my head. I think there was that one game in 99 where LSU could have won, and Josh Booty tried to run it in. He got tackled. And then all the games in the I was thinking about it. Jordy, Saban will obviously be in Baton Rouge, but outside of the 2 years he coached in Miami, which I think was 2005, 2006, Nick Saban was part of the LSU-Alabama game every year but 2 years, from the year 2000 through the year 2023.
Wow.
I think he was 5-0 against Alabama at LSU, and I think he was 12-5 against LSU at Alabama because they had the national championship game as well. So that'd be very interesting to see what kind of reception he gets and everything this week. But those are a few off the top of my head. Certainly 2019 when LSU finally slayed the dragon, so to speak, and went over there and won and beat Tua. And I mean, when you don't have the divisions anymore, but if you want to go to the SEC championship game, you had to beat Alabama. If you don't beat Alabama, you don't go to the SEC championship game. So that's all those losses in between. Les Miles' first year, I remember, or Nick Saban's first year in 2007, LSU had a far superior team, and they started messing around a bit and had the Chad Jones, Jacob Hester heroics, early Doucette to win. It's funny. I interviewed two great LSU offensive linemen yesterday that we're going to put up this week, Andrew Whitworth and Alan Faneca. And Whitworth just came out and said, "Man, when we were winning, we were not winning because of Les Miles. We're winning because of Nick Saban and the players and,
Thank you.
and all that." Andrew. So that was a pretty blunt assessment from Mr. Whitworth.
It's great to hear from somebody that shares the same sentiment. What about the 2024 edition of this game, Jacques? Both of them outside the top 10, which has been a long time pre-Saban. But this game, it still has it, man. I mean, it's still got the juice.
Well, I think it's going to be a huge game regardless, but the 12-team playoff, I think, adds the juice to it. If this was a 14 playoff and they both have 2 losses, then it's a big game and it'll be packed and it's LSU Alabama, but it doesn't have the national significance to it. Like you said, I mean, typically Alabama comes into this game with 1 loss max. They're usually either undefeated or just one loss, and so Coach Kelly and them, or Coach Kelly and the team, are not embracing or at least not publicly saying that this is a de facto playoff game or we have to win to keep our playoff hopes alive. But it looks that way for sure. I think if LSU wins this game, they're set up pretty well to go to Florida and win and then beat Vanderbilt and Oklahoma at home. I don't think any of those games will be easy, so to speak, but I think this is the toughest of the 4 games remaining to make the playoff. And if they don't win this game, then I think they can still win the other 3, but then you'll be right back where you were the first 2 years, which isn't bad, although you made the SEC championship the first year, but you're in a 9-3 situation playing for a 10th win in a bowl game, but you're not in the playoff. So it'd be very interesting to see how Garrett Nussmeier bounces back. He had a nightmarish second half at Texas A&M. I think the first interception was the worst because they really just turned the whole momentum of the game. You're up by 10, and you you roll left, you throw right, and before you know it, A&M's at your 10-yard line. They put the backup Marcel Reed in. He gets the snap. He runs in from 10 yards. The place is going nuts. He's got his confidence, and the whole game kind of turned right there. So it'll be interesting to see how Garrett bounces back, especially with a new starter on the offensive line, filling in for Garrett Dellinger. Can the running game produce anything to help him out? Certainly against A&M, it didn't do anything. Special teams, you don't be kicking too many field goals. Certainly when you get in the red zone, you need to score touchdowns. And then I'm looking at Jalen Milroe, and last year he had he ran for 155 yards against LSU and 4 touchdowns last year in Tuscaloosa, and that by far was his biggest rushing output of the year. But I'm looking at his numbers this year. Let's see, in the last 4 games, he's thrown 3 touchdowns and he's thrown 5 interceptions. 11 carries, 50 yards against Missouri, 14 carries, 11 yards against Tennessee, 18 carries, 36 yards against South Carolina, 7 carries, 10 yards against Vanderbilt. I realize they take out sacks when you're a quarterback, but he is not lighting the world on fire. So I know he's talented. I know that's the biggest question for LSU. Can they tackle him? But he's definitely not a Heisman Trophy candidate, in my opinion, at this point.
What do you make of the defense's, challenge that they faced in the bye week? It seemed like, when I was talking about what happened at A&M, I feel like that's probably going to be a low point for Blake Baker, in year 1. I mean, just having that happen to that defense and then being able to back that up with a guy like Milroe, who you just kind of broke down. But, throw the numbers out. He's probably the best running back in the country that just happens to be a good thrower of the football. What do you make of the challenge they have Saturday with him?
Yeah, and he's 225 pounds. Marcel Reed was 185 soaking wet. And so this guy's, he's pretty thick, and we saw what happened last year. I think that, I've talked to high school coaches, and look, we've done, Blake Baker's done a great job this year, but a lot of them say, look, that's day one stuff, guarding the zone read, and they just couldn't do it the other night. And the Greg Penn comments after the game, well, we didn't prepare this and that. I mean, that was certainly lightning rod, get people emotional type stuff, but at the same time, it's something you should be ready for, whether you prepared for the quarterback or not. So I think that losing in a way could be a big help for LSU, because they got punched in the mouth. They got embarrassed. They've been hearing about it for 2 weeks, and that can give you a real edge and motivation in your preparation. And so that's the positive outlook I'm gonna take on it, that guys like Whit Weeks and Savion Jones and Braden Swinson and all those guys have had great years. They've kind of been patted on the back a lot. Blake Baker's been patted on the back a lot. Damian Ramos, special teams, Garrett Nussmeier, they all just had a really nightmarish game against Texas A&M. So I think the bye week came at the right time to get ready and, have Tiger Stadium in your corner. Alabama always brings a decent amount of fans. They'll have their pocket of red there in the south end zone, and they'll have plenty in the upper decks as well, I'm sure. But this is when you need Tiger Stadium. I've been that storm. I don't think is going to be. It's not going to be an impact, is it?
I don't think it's what they anticipated early on. Yeah.
So we had a lot of high school football. Well, I'd say a lot. At least 3 or 4 get moved from Friday to Thursday. So I don't. Hopefully, this isn't going to. It's not going to damage. I don't think it's going to be a big damage maker. It's just nobody wants to be in a big mess, and so hopefully, no rain, not too much wind, and a nice night in Tiger Stadium. We've been blessed with pretty good weather this year with LSU football. Hopefully, it stays that way.
How about LSU basketball that got going this week? Both the men and the women. We saw the women win earlier this week in their season opener. But both teams getting going, Jacques, with some obviously the women have high expectations, but the men, I think, are facing some expectations that haven't been around this program in a while.
Yeah, Monday saw the highlights. I mean, Eastern Kentucky certainly, not a team that's going to threaten LSU in any way. Flage came out, scored 25. Anissa Morrow had a big game. Some of the new players, Cheyenne Day Wilson, popping some 3-pointers and whatnot. I think, I'm not trying to be messy. I think my biggest interest right now is what's going on with last year Poa and when is she coming back to the team and when will she? I mean, she's a big part of your national championship team in 2023 and your Elite 8 team last year. And it just feels like the more time that passes and she's not out there, she's digging a hole in terms of, coming back and being able to contribute. So I'd like to see, I really like her and, her story and everything. I'd like to see her back. So I don't think the women, they're going to play maybe a couple of bigger name programs, but they're not going to play any big ranked teams for a while. And the men tonight, they play UO Monroe. So it's the big debut for Matt McMahon and company. I think that he's done a good job with the recruiting. Certainly his class last year and certainly the class coming up is in the top 5. Coach Patrick and his return has been a big boost to the recruiting. And, you just like to, and I think they're making an effort to connect with the students. They're doing that cart with the coach where he's riding around a golf cart on campus and talking to students and trying to get them out and make them a part of men's basketball, because certainly they've been a big part of women's basketball, and certainly women's basketball is won at a very, very high clip. But you want the students to come out and support the men as well. So it'll be interesting to see Cam Carter and these new additions how they pan out. It's college basketball is always interesting. The holidays and whatnot interrupt it more than any other sport we deal with. Right? They get going for a little bit. You got Thanksgiving, then you got Christmas and New Year's, and then you miss some time, and then the conference play starts. So, yeah, I'm interested to see how they'll do tonight and, what kind of team he's got in year 3. Some people would say year 2 because year 1 was such a dire situation, such an uphill battle.
JD, WAFB Sports Director. You can find him, WAFB, on YouTube. Also follow him on